Okay, guys, so today we're going to be talking about pairs of angles. You should have a note sheet in front of you that's titled Pairs of Angles, and it has some blanks, and at the bottom it has a practice problem. If you don't have this in front of you, you need to get it in front of you because that's what we're going to be using today for the lesson. So, we're going to be talking about different kinds of angles and different kinds of angle relationships. Most of this stuff you've heard before, but it might have been a long time. So, we're going to cover it, and I'm going to try and give you some helpful hints. So, remembering it is easier, basically. So the first kind of angles we're going to talk about are adjacent angles. If I underline it, it goes in a blank. So adjacent angles are two angles in the same plane with a common vertex and a common side, but no common interior points. And it's telling us that angle 1 and angle 2 are adjacent angles. So this is a very nice definition, but what I want you to remember about adjacent angles is that they are next to each other, guys. Adjacent angles are next to each other. The next kind of angle that I want to talk about are linear pairs. So a linear pair is a pair of angles that are adjacent, which again, guys, adjacent means that these two angles are next to each other, whose non-common sides are opposite rays. And it's telling us that angles 3 and 4 form a linear pair. This is how you need to remember this. Guys, linear. What does linear mean to us? Linear means line. So these are two angles that form a line. You've actually already seen this before when we talked about our perpendicular bisector. Guys, these are two 90-degree angles that form a line. Okay? Linear pairs form a line. That's how I want you to remember that. We're not going to do this part. Okay, so complementary angles and supplementary angles. You have definitely heard about these before, but they're kind of hard to keep straight. So complementary angles are two angles whose measures have a sum. And remember, sum means you're adding. When you add the two angles together, they add to 90 degrees. I want you to write that really big right next to complementary. And it's telling us that angles A and B are complementary angles. Notice they are not adjacent. They are not next to each other. Complementary angles do not have to be next to each other to be complementary. Okay? So these guys are not next to each other, but they are still complementary angles. And I know this because 53 degrees plus, 37 degrees adds to 90 degrees. The next kind of angle we're going to talk about is a supplementary angle. So I want you to write 180 really big next to supplementary. So again, these are two angles whose measures add, or they sum up to 180 degrees. So in this situation, 150 degrees and 30 degrees, these happen to be adjacent angles, but they do not have to be adjacent. So 150 plus 30 degrees, well, that's 180 degrees. So yay, we know this is a supplementary set of angles. How you get this straight, because supplementary is a long word, complementary is a long word, and I easily get them confused. So if you write C and S on your paper, I want you to write 90 next to C and 180 next to S. So I remember it like this. Alphabetically, C comes before S. Numerically, 90 comes before 180. So S goes with 180 and C goes with 90. That's how I remember it in my head. You do whatever you need to remember it. Whoops. So lastly, we're going to talk about vertical angles. You are going to see these guys a whole lot. They're not leaving us. Vertical angles are shaped like bow ties. Okay, they're formed by two lines that intersect each other. And the big thing here is the vertical angle theorem. Angle theorem. So here I see that I have two lines that intersect each other. And 1 and 3 are vertical angles. And 2 and 4 are vertical angles. Guys, these are non-adjacent. They are not next to each other. They are across from each other. What the vertical angle theorem tells us is not only are these vertical angles, but angle 1 and angle 3 are congruent. And angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. And let's remember that if we have two angles that are congruent, their measures are equal. So if I tell you that the measure of angle 1 is 100 degrees, because angle 1 is congruent to angle 3, angle 3 also has a measure of 100 degrees. So let's use this property to do a quick little practice problem. So our example is if the measure of angle 1 is 10x plus 6 degrees and the measure of angle 2 is 12x plus 30 degrees. Guys, it should not be a 12, it should be a 2. My bad. What is the measure of angle 2? We need to make sure we answer what the question is asking us to answer. So it tells us that angle 1 is 10x plus 6 and angle 2 is 2x plus 30. Guys, these are vertical angles. We just talked about them. Vertical angles have equal measures. I know that the measure of angle 1 is equal to the measure of angle 2. Well, that tells me that 10x plus 6 is equal to 2x plus 30. And now I have a normal equation that we've been solving since the beginning of the year. Remember, my goal is to get the x's on one side and the numbers on the other. So I'm going to start with the x's. The opposite of positive 2x is negative 2x, so I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. 10x minus 2x, well, that's 8x. I still have plus 6 is equal to 2x minus 2x is 0, and then a positive 30. I want to get x by itself, so I need to move my 6 to the other side to get all of the numbers together. So the opposite of adding 6 is subtracting 6. So I have 8x is equal to 24. And the last thing I'm going to do to get x by itself is divide both sides by 8, which tells me that x is equal to 3. Now, before you get too excited and think that you have answered the question, let's remember that it is asking for the measure of angle 2. Guys, the measure of angle 2 is not just x. The measure of angle 2 is 2x plus 30. Now, we have x, so we can figure out what it is by just plugging our x, which is 3, into where x is in our expression. So 2 times 3 plus 30. Well, 2 times 3 is 6 plus 30. Well, that's 36. We are talking about the measure of an angle. So it's not just 36. It is 36 degrees. You need to remember to put the degree symbol if you're talking about the measure of an angle. Today, when you're working on the worksheet that you have, which is entitled Angles in Algebra, go ahead and pull that out and put it in front of you. It is a bunch of problems just like this example. So you should have, whoops, 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. So you should have this in front of you. Notice that on number 1, 2, and 3, it is just like what we just did. That last problem, it is the exact same thing. Number 4 and number 5, it is asking for x. Okay, so once you get x, you can just stop. You don't have to plug it back into anything. But here, I'm asking for the measures of angles, so you are going to have to plug stuff back in. So we know the relationship between our vertical angles, okay? They're equal to each other. But I want to make one quick little remark about the relationship between angles 1 and angle 2. They are not vertical angles, they are next to each other. But guys, they form a line. Since they form a line, I know that angle 1 plus angle 2 is 180 degrees. You are probably going to have to use this on number 3. Okie dokie. Also on number 2. You need to know that. that 1 plus 2, or angle 1 plus angle 2 is 180 degrees. In the same way, angle 3 plus angle 4 is 180 degrees. If you get really stuck, the substitute has my worked out solutions to this worksheet, and you're welcome to ask them for it. That you can't take it back to your desk, but you can look at what I did. I'll see y'all all on Monday, and I hope you have a great weekend.